everyone. Hi, folks. All right, let's just give it a minute here as everyone streams into the room. Okay, hi, everyone. I am Rachel Carollo with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. Thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to join us this evening, this afternoon, wherever you're calling in from. I recognize a bunch of folks that have been here for almost every single one of these events. So thank you for that. And then I see some new folks on the line too. So the oldies and the goodies and the new folks, all of us, thank you for being here. So we are so thrilled to be joined tonight by Maxwell Alejandro Frost, running in a blue open district, Florida's 10th district, here with us tonight. When you have a question, we have already some great pre-submitted questions, but we want to get live questions from you all on the line with us now. Just go ahead, drop your question in the chat box. Bear with me. I will try to get to as many as we can. We want to be respectful of Maxwell's time, and of course all of your times for joining us tonight too. So bear with me, but we will do our best to get to as many questions as we can. And finally, I'll just mention that while we've designed these events very intentionally to not charge a ticket price on the front end for any of these events, because we really think it's important that you get to hear from the candidate before you chip in, and you make that decision once you hear from the candidate yourself. And if you're feeling inspired, that you'll do so then. So if that's something that you can do, if that's something you can consider, Maxwell and all of us here at the P-Trip would be very appreciative of that. So we will dig in just a second, but before we do, we've been doing something at the top and end of these calls to just create a little bit greater sense of community and to make it feel like we're together in a room. So could everyone please unmute yourself? Let's all say hi to Maxwell. Let's all say hi to each other, and then please mute yourself back.
Hi, Maxwell.
Hello.
Hey,
Maxwell.
Tony. Hi, I'm Tony.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi,
Buenas
hello.
noches.
Thank you. Hello, Tony. Hi, Paul. Okay. Hi, folks. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. Oh, folks, and if you can please mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay,
Oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
going to go ahead and turn it over to our co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor, to share a little bit more about Maxwell. Stephanie?
Great, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our call tonight. I am excited to introduce Maxwell Alejandro Frost, who is running for an open blue seat in Florida's 10th congressional district. And Maxwell's race is so exciting because he represents a new generation of leadership. He's a young organizer who has already accomplished an impressive amount. As the National Organizing Director of March for Our Lives, he coordinated thousands of young activists in the fight against gun violence. As a national organizer with the ACLU, he pushed Joe Biden to agree to abolish the Hyden Amendment. And he was part of the grassroots movement that worked to restore voting rights to 1.6 million Floridians with previous felonies. And this is exactly the kind of person we need in Congress: young, energetic leadership ready to fight every day to transform our climate and our economy. And Maxwell also impressed me in our first conversation because he understands how critical it is for candidates and elected officials to talk about a positive transformation, a positive transformative vision for America, something aspirational, not backwards looking. And I can't wait for you to hear what he has to say. So with that, let me give a very warm welcome to Maxwell Frost and turn things over to him for a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you to the PCCC team. Really excited to be here. How's everybody doing? Good? All right. Good to hear. Awesome. Good to hear. Well, like Stephanie said, my name is Maxwell Frost. I am running for the United States Congress in Florida's 10th Congressional District here in Orlando, Florida, the place that I was born and raised in. I am a organizer, I'm a musician, I'm the son of a special needs teacher and a musician. And it's really an honor to be in this race to fight and serve my community, the place that I was raised in. For me, my fight started 10 years ago, and I'll just say a little bit about my story real quick because it's important to the reason I'm running and who I am. 10 years ago, my life completely changed. For folks who don't know, like I said, I'm a musician. I actually went to an arts high school and middle school as a public school, and I studied jazz drums. Before every jazz band concert, my friends and I would go to like a Fridays, I think it was a Fridays or a Chili's, and we'd load up on a bunch of junk food right before the concert. I remember we were sitting there, munching down on quesadillas and French fries, and there was a silence that kind of swept the entire restaurant. And then we all kind of simultaneously looked up and looked at the television screens, and we saw that somebody had walked into an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, and murdered a bunch of students and their teachers. And for me, I didn't grow up in a place where gun violence was a daily thing. So it had a profound impact on me to see someone do such an act of hate. That night at the concert, I couldn't play the same. I kept thinking about it. I begged my parents to let me go to Washington, D.C. for the vigil and memorial they were having just a few weeks later. And it was there that I had, what we call a call to action that completely changed my life. I remember it was the night of the vigil. It was all of the teenagers and kids and siblings of the victims sitting around a pool, and then little 15-year-old Maxwell Frost from Florida. And across from me was a guy named Matthew Soto. Matthew's sister, Vicky, was the teacher who, when she heard the gunshots, hid her class, her children, in cabinets throughout the classroom. And when the shooter came around and he said, "Where's your class?" she refused to tell him, and he murdered her right there. And I remember Matthew was crying about how much he missed his sister, how much he'll never get to meet her kids. And seeing, at the time he was 16, seeing a 16-year-old with the demeanor of a 60-year-old crying over his sister who was murdered for going to school completely shattered me, completely changed my life. I remember I went straight to my hotel room that night. I was crying. I called my mom. And I remember that I made a commitment to myself. I said, for the rest of my life, I want to fight for a world where no one has to ever feel the way I saw Matthew feel tonight. And y'all know how this work is. You get in for one reason, and then you find out there's a lot of things messed up, right? There's a lot of issues. But the good news is for every issue, there's a ton of solutions. And for every solution, there are countless people doing the work. And that's what's kept me in it and given me hope. After that, when I turned 18, I started working on elections and campaigns across the country. Got hired by this little organization called the ACLU here in Florida to fight for Amendment 4, the ballot referendum to get voting rights to over 1.6 million people with previous felonies. After that, got hired by the National ACLU to fight for civil rights and liberties and ensure every person running for president, because if y'all don't remember, back in 2020, the Democratic primary, I think there was about 106 people running for president. Our goal was to make sure every single one of them was good on civil rights and liberties, and that's where we used creative organizing. And with a cell phone video, myself and a volunteer named Nina Gray, she was 77 years old, we pushed at the time Vice President Biden to reject the Hyde Amendment, and now he's the president. And I always bring that story up to people because if people tell you that organizing doesn't work, you can point to stories like that, right? And then I became the national organizing director of March for Our Lives, the movement that came out of the shooting that happened in Parkland, Florida just a few years ago. And for me, this running for office wasn't something I thought I'd be doing, especially right now. For folks who don't know, I'm 25 years old. Early last year, I had a group of organizers from, during the Black Lives Matter uprisings. I organized here in Orlando. I've been beat, tear gas, maced, arrested, and went to jail for saying Black Lives Matter. And I remember early last year, a group of those organizers came up to me and said, "Maxwell, Val Demings is running for the Senate. You should run for Congress." First thing I said was, hell no. I was like, I'm okay. I don't want to run for office. I don't want to run for Congress. I'm all right. But they planted a seed in my mind. And, for folks who don't know, I was adopted at birth. And, for me, I was at a crossroads deciding on whether or not I would want to run. I had conversations with tons of folks in my community. People were excited about a bold progressive running for Congress here in the heart of Florida, but I still wasn't decided. And so something told me to ask my parents about my biological family. And so I remember hearing the story. It's not a unique story, unfortunately. I mean, look, I'm one of 8 siblings, and I found all of this out June of last year, about a month and a half before I announced my campaign. I'm one of 8 siblings. My parents simply could not afford to have another kid, my biological parents. My biological mother, because she was born into a zip code that had been forgotten about by the government, she was stuck in a vicious cycle of crime, drugs, poverty. And I remember talking with her on the phone for the first time, June of last year. We were talking about the conditions of my birth. I mean, the fact that when I was born as an infant, I was shaking for 2 weeks. When my parents took me back to run tests on me, they found out that I was suffering from withdrawals from crack cocaine because my biological mother had been using. And this was a lot for me to take in. And I want to be honest, I wasn't really mad at her. I was just incredibly saddened because I know that the system that she was born into. Either way, you know, for me, my theory of change is rooted in seeing the world through the eyes of the most vulnerable, right? As an organizer, as a leader, that's something I always told folks that's what we needed to focus on and keep in mind all the time. And I'm on the phone with my biological mom. She's talking about her life. And she said, Maxwell, I want you to know that I had you at the most vulnerable point in my life. And the second she said that, I mean, like a minute later, we hung up the phone and I said, I'm running for Congress. I'm running for people like my biological mother. I'm running for people like myself. I'm running for my community. I'm running for my friends. I'm running because we live in a country where folks feel like to be healthy is a privilege. To have dignity is a privilege. And for me, this campaign means a lot of things, but the ultimate reason why we're running is to challenge the people here in Florida. And as y'all know, a lot of people have given up on Florida, have given up on this state, despite us passing Amendment 4, over 60% of the vote, and Amendment 2, $15 minimum wage with over 60% of the vote. People have given up on our state, and there's people here who have given up on themselves. This campaign is here to win, right? We're going to win. We're not just here to push the field or anything. We're going to win this campaign, but also to challenge the people to believe that they inherently deserve better things from government. They deserve healthcare. They deserve to be healthy. They deserve food. They deserve a roof over their head. They deserve, a job with a livable wage, and that gives them dignity. And I'm always asked when I'm out in the community, Max, this is great. This is great. Why do we deserve these things? And it's simple. We deserve it by virtue of being a human being, by virtue of being born. You know, this line of thinking, I mean, this isn't something we hear from politicians all the time. And that's a problem. I mean, we deserve to live in a country where people know what we inherently, again, deserve. And like for me, when I finally, as an organizer, accepted that, it gave me a fire and a resolve that allowed me to go to jail, wake up the next morning and go right back to protesting. It's what gave me the resolve to travel to Virginia with a bunch of March for Our Lives organizers, sleep overnight in the Capitol, wake up the next morning and lobby for safer gun laws, as there were thousands of armed folks, a lot of them white supremacists, who made death threats on us. It gave me the resolve to do that. And I want the folks in my community to have that resolve too, in the workplace, in places of worship, in school, right? Everywhere. And then for me, that culture change, one of the places it can begin is by electing leaders who believe that. And that's why I'm running for Congress, y'all. So we're really excited about it. People are excited about these bold progressive ideas like Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, reimagining public safety, and ensuring that we don't live in a country where 100 people die a day due to gun violence. And so then comes the question, how are we going to win? Well, the way you win campaigns, right? It's kind of simple, but behind the simplicity, there's a lot of it's really complicated. You have to amass the most resources, use them in the right way, and get out the vote. And resources doesn't just mean money, it means people power, right? It means community support. In this campaign, not only have we raised the most money time and time again out of every candidate, but we've also raised the most money from the most people. Last quarter, we had over 13,000 donations, average donation $29.25, which is kind of unheard of in congressional races. And then we also have the most volunteers. And of course, we're going to knock every damn door. We're going to call every number in this district. We are injecting cultural joy in this campaign. During Pride, I put my old high school salsa band on a Penske truck and we drove throughout downtown Orlando. We just had an oyster roast and a jazz fundraiser. This campaign is different. And that's what's going to lead us to win. And so I just want to thank you all for being here today, taking the time out of your night to learn more about my story and what we're doing here in Florida. And for folks who don't live in the state, please don't give up, right? We always get so close in this state, and the solution isn't to run away from it, it's to put more resources into it. We will elect the first Generation Z member of Congress in the heart of this state. And imagine, and it's going to be a bold progressive, me, and imagine the message that's going to send to this country when our state just passed a Don't Say Gay bill, is restricting millions of people from voting, to be quite honest, just passed anti-immigrant legislation, is making it so we can't talk about slavery in our classrooms. This campaign is going to show the country that that does not represent our state, it doesn't represent Florida. This is the state where March for Our Lives came out of, where after a mass shooting, students said we called BS. This is the state where after Trayvon Martin was murdered, tons of Black and brown youth got together, the Dream Defenders, and said enough is enough, we deserve better. And this is the state where we're going to elect Maxwell Frost to Congress, and I'm really excited to be a part of this movement, y'all. So thank you so much. We need volunteers, so please go to frostforcongress.com to sign up to volunteer. But on top of that, we need resources, we need money, so we can hire our staff, pay them that livable and really thrivable wage so they can go out and make this happen. We need the money to get on the radio and TV and do a good field program. These resources are going to be used to register voters, which isn't only going to benefit me, it's going to benefit tons of great candidates and win this campaign. And so whether it's $27 or $2,700, every bit counts. And I really appreciate y'all. So thank you so much.
Maxwell, thank you. All right, folks, we have questions rolling in, so let's dig into them. So our first question, he's having some issues with his camera, so he will be joining us with his voice, and please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, but Kawan Afre, will you please go ahead and unmute yourself, sir? And hopefully I did not butcher your name too badly. I'm sorry if I did. And please tell us where you are joining us from, and please ask Maxwell your question.
Yes, good afternoon. That was excellent. Can you hear me?
Yay! Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I bought this monitor a year ago. It didn't have a camera on it because I retired, so I wasn't concerned about the cameras. It's wonderful to be with you. Good afternoon to everyone, Mr. Frost. I had submitted a couple questions when I first saw the advertisement for this particular evening's event. And I basically had two questions. I know that you are running for statewide, for national office. But my first question is a statewide issue, and that is the law that was passed last year. I refer to it as the anti-protest law. I forget what the exact title of that legislation was. I wanted to hear from you what your thoughts are about that. And then secondly, on the national level, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the George Floyd and the John Lewis, and I believe it was consolidated, and it's a right to work, or right to vote, or freedom to vote bills that passed the House side of our Congress, but are languishing in the Senate side of Congress. Just wanted to hear your thoughts on those bits of legislation. And thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for being here. Well, first off, the state bill you're referring to, HB1, we call it the anti-protest bill because that's exactly what it is. I think the governor called it the anti-riot bill or something like that, which we really didn't have any riots here in Florida. But either way, look, I mean, as someone who hit the streets and has been someone who is as an activist on the streets organizing with folks, it's a bill that's, it's horrible. I mean, it is an egregious violation of our civil rights and liberties. It's meant to keep people from protesting. And, let's highlight some of the worst things about this bill. If you're on a Zoom, like let's say we were on the Zoom right now and together we all plan to protest tomorrow. If for some reason one person in that protest violated the law or threw a water bottle or anything like that, we on this call could lose any benefits we have that we're receiving from the state. We'd essentially be RICO'd, which is what which is a tool that the government uses with like organized crime and stuff. So as someone who's making a protest, you don't even have to go. You can get in trouble, lose all your benefits, lose college scholarships, lose all of that. So it's horrible. It also extends stand your ground to businesses who, if you're within a certain radius from a business, you can just be literally walking by in a protest. If the business owner feels like the riot, like the rally is threatening their business, they can walk out the door and shoot you dead and have no repercussions. So this is the type of legislation we're dealing with here in Florida. As you know, we just went through redistricting and Republicans have cemented another decade of Republican rule at our state legislature. I'm not saying this to tell folks that we should give up hope in this state. This is why we need bold progressive folks on the local level, city councils, mayors, but also at the federal level, so we can pass protection. So states in the South who, because of the system, are at a disadvantage, are not forgotten about, and have strong, bold folks fighting for them. As far as the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and also I think it was the Freedom to Vote Act, we need to pass both pieces of legislation, right? Both are important. And much like the whole fiasco that we were going through with infrastructure and Build Back Better, these are two bills that build off one another to ensure that everybody in this country have the right to vote, and not just the right to vote, but are able to vote. Because we all know there's a difference between having a right and having the ability to do something. And so I favor both of those, both pieces of legislation, and there's more we need to do beyond that. Obviously, making Election Day a federal holiday, ensuring folks can take off of work to go vote. I believe in automatic voter registration. The day you become 18, you should be registered to vote, not have to go fill anything out. There's a lot of what I would call layups that we can do to easily expand voter turnout in this country. So 100%.
Thank you, Maxwell. And Mr. Affrey, thank you for the question. Okay, up next, we are going to go to Miss Karen Birch. Miss Karen, will you please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Maxwell your question? And will you please also share with folks where you're joining us from, please?
Sure. This is actually, everybody calls me Kiwi, so I knew you jumped over that.
Oh, Kiwi, I'm sorry. Hello.
So that's all right. That's okay. Maxwell, what a pleasure this is to meet you. As I wrote in my question, I first saw you on, I believe it was the Lawrence O'Donnell show on MSNBC. And it's been rare that I was hooked on somebody so immediately. You were so impressive, as you have been tonight, that, I'm also retired and don't have a lot of money, but you were the only person that I have given a little money to every month. So I'm committed to you, even though I'm in Ontario, California, which is a little bit east of LA. My question is, Maxwell, how do you deal with frustration? Because you will undoubtedly face that when you are elected to Congress. How do you deal with frustration?
That's a great question. And thank you so much, Kiwi, for being one of our amazing monthly donors and for believing in me and believing in this movement, this campaign. I mean, it means the world. This is a great question. And I feel like my answer changes like every year about, I have different ways to cope with stuff. For me, like I kind of said at the beginning, it's always been the people that I'm doing this work with. I remember when I first started, like 15, 16, 17 years old, taking lobbying meetings for gun violence prevention. And I would go into these meetings. I remember the one specifically that I always think about is the meeting I had with Marco Rubio, survivors of a school shooting. And I remember being in that meeting and him like hugging people and crying with us. And like, I left that meeting, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, my voice was higher at this point. I'm like, Mom, we changed Marco Rubio's mind. He said he's gonna help us out. And we started freaking out, God bless my mom. And the next day we're in the gallery and he went in and voted the same way he always does. And it was frustrating. And I remember that night I was mad, I was angry. And then we all went out with the survivors. And I remember one of them looked at me and said, we got to keep going. 100 people a day are depending on this movement. And so it's really been the people for me, to be honest, Kiwi. And, I've had a lot of folks who say, Max, it's all great. You believe in healthcare for everybody. You believe in housing. You believe in all this. You're going to go into Congress all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and then you're going to realize that you can't get anything done there. And, let's be clear. I understand that Congress it's a difficult place to get things done. I know that, right? I mean, when I worked at the ACLU in March for Our Lives, specifically, we worked with Congress and the White House to get $5 billion for community violence intervention and Build Back Better. Like, I understand it's frustrating, but the difference and the thing I love about progressives is we don't allow our understanding of a slow system change who we are or what we believe in. And for me, that's at the center of my work as an organizer. Of course, there's times where we have to compromise, but at the end of the day, we know what we're fighting for, and we're not going to let go of that no matter what. But to answer your question, Kiwi, it's the people. People like you.
Kiwi, thank you so much. Maxwell, thank you for the answer. And Kiwi, thank you for supporting Maxwell. Okay, let's move on to the next question, folks. Maxwell, I'll just share in the chat. Folks are, chatting in the chat box, and I'll say several of them. Rachel shared that she just contributed to you, so thank you. Thank you, Rachel. So up next, let's go to Ernest Bailey. Ernest, will you please unmute yourself, and will you please share with folks where are you joining us from, and what is your question for Maxwell, sir?
Hi, I'm joining from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Maxwell, for sharing your story. I really appreciate hearing it. You sound like a fantastic candidate to me. Building off of your story, I was just hoping to hear a little bit from you about what policies you hope to push for with regard to drugs and housing if you are elected.
100%. Thank you so much, Ernest. Well, specifically with drugs, I believe in the decriminalization of drugs, right? And more specifically, when we talk about marijuana, we need to legalize marijuana, but that's not enough, right? The war on drugs has had significant negative impacts on communities across this country, namely poor and working class communities, even more Black and Brown communities. And so for me, it's important that as we get into a world where marijuana is legalized and people are, it's a big business, that a lot of those gains are going directly to the communities that have been on the, that have received those negative impacts. We also need to expunge the records of anyone who's ever been, arrested or convicted of marijuana charges. Those people who are in jail for those charges need to be released. So obviously legalizing marijuana, of course, 100%, but there's a lot we need to do besides that to help kind of repair the damage that this bogus war on drugs has caused in this country. And as far as other drugs, like, again, I believe in decriminalization. I don't believe people who are dealing with addiction, which is a disease, need to be thrown in a cage and locked up. I don't think that's the way to help people, and government should be in the business of helping people. So that's where I'm at on that. The second one, which is that you brought up, which is housing, which for folks who don't know, I mean, we have a housing problem in the entire country, but in Central Florida, we're actually experiencing one of the worst housing crises in the country. I was kind of kicked out of my home back in October of last year when the rent hike freeze was taken, stopped. My landlord raised my rent by about 33%. We could no longer afford it, had to move out. For about a month, I was houseless. I stayed at Airbnb for a couple of weeks. Then I started couch surfing and staying with friends on couches. And I found myself staying in our where we're working for the campaign office until like really late because I had nowhere to go. And the whole experience was horrible, sucked. And we just found a place and it took a long time. But the problem is, we need more housing, right? And we need more housing near opportunity, and we need more affordable housing. We're actually putting together a housing platform right now. It's a housing and transportation platform. A lot of it centers around getting more money into our community so we can get more bus stops, get more transportation, ensure that there's more housing available for people. But we actually have a special program we're working on that'll be kind of very niche, where essentially we're calling it community builders, and it's getting money to our county to start a program which, and this, I know developers, it's kind of a bad word, but where we actually train developers from the community, people who are born and raised here, to specifically develop mixed income housing. So that way folks who need affordable housing can live in some, in nice areas in Orlando. I think all too often, when government housing is built, it's not built up to code. It doesn't look good. It's not like, a lot of times it's not a dignified place to live. I think mixed income housing gives us a cool opportunity where there's, units that are more expensive for folks who can afford it. And those subsidize the affordable housing units for other people who can live near opportunity. And so that's kind of a niche program that we're working on right now with a lot of affordable housing advocates in Central Florida. And we're gonna roll that out hopefully in the next month or two.
Thank you. I'll definitely be supporting your.
Thank you, Ernest. Thank you, Ernest, for the question. Maxwell, thank you. And Ernest, thank you for the support. Okay, up next, let's go to Miss Rachel Glass. Rachel, can you please go ahead and tell folks where you are joining us from? And will you please ask Maxwell your question? Rachel, the floor is yours.
Hi, Maxwell. Thank you so much. I am from Seattle, Washington, and I am a loyal progressive. And if I lived in Florida, I would so be voting for you. It's really exciting to see your campaign, and I'm just so excited and happy about that, and about your energy and your motivation. And so that is what my question is. There is a lot of, and I don't know if this is just media propaganda, there's a lot of sort of strategizing and people, talking heads, talking about that, the Dems, because we are the incumbent party, that there's odds are against us for winning in the midterms. I'm really worried about that. And so I just wonder, like, I don't know, I know that the mood is different in Washington than it is in Florida, but what do you do to help to get some fire into the Dems' collective pants for, getting up the vote, and for, getting motivated, and not just sitting at home, because midterms historically don't get the big turnouts as the main presidential years do. And I'm doing a lot of GOTV work, and I really am wanting to, help the cause and get people to vote. So how do you do that where you are?
Thank you so much for the question, Rachel. Thanks for being here. This is a great question. Like quick story, like back, like in 2020, I remember we had a meeting early in 2020 with a bunch of youth organizations, Next Gen, Sunrise, March for Our Lives, different people. We sat down and we said, hey, listen, this year we want to have the highest youth voter turnout in the history of our country. And we were kind of scratching our heads like, oh my God, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I mean, I think at the time people, we were like, okay, I'm not, out of all the people running for president, Biden might not necessarily be the one to excite the young people. So what do we do? And a lot of it was looking at the messaging that, Democrats typically use and were planning on using in this election, which was anti-Trump, and kind of pushing back against that. What we found in our field efforts, which reached millions of people, of young people across the country, is that people want something to vote for, not against. This is a big reason why in 2018 we had the highest youth voter turnout of any midterms, because it was right post March for Our Lives, and students were traveling the country, and there was like an energy about a better world, right? A better world is possible. Let's go out and vote for people who are going to help us achieve that. And for me, and this is specifically with young folks in practice so far, but I think this message should go for everybody, is we have to talk about what we're for, the future we deserve. over 60% of the people in my district cannot afford an unexpected $300 bill tomorrow. Everything we talk about has to be about how does Medicare for all, Green New Deal, what does that mean for me? Because we know what these things mean, right? We understand, but the average person doesn't necessarily know how it's going to change their life. So for me, Rachel, it's building that world and communicating it in a very specific way to people that get them excited to go out and vote. And for me, I plan on putting a lot of sweat equity on the line. My district is very blue, like I said. Once we win this primary, we're going to win the general. Not that we're taking anything for granted, but just looking at the reality. And I am committed to traveling up and down this state, or maybe out of the state too, to get young people, progressive folks out to go vote and excited about some of the amazing candidates we have at the state and local level, because that's where a lot of the difference can be made. And so for me, that's something I'm committed to doing, definitely hitting the road, getting people excited. And also, I think a big part of this is just electing people who are a bit different than what we're used to. There's a caricature of what a politician's supposed to be. And I feel like that has been a mistake. Obviously, we don't have the change we want. People aren't as excited. And I think there is merit in candidates that excite people and just provide a different vision of a different world. And so that's what I'm excited about. And that's how I believe we'll have a high voter turnout, in the midterms.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for the question. Maxwell, thank you for the answer. Okay, so let's, there are folks joining us on Facebook too, so I don't want to leave them out. So let's try and pull in some of these folks if we can. So Maxwell, Stacy asks, Stacy says, I saw that there's a new election police force in Florida that will monitor voter fraud. Can you share your thoughts on this? Oh, Maxwell, you're on mute.
My fault. Yeah, well, that is a thing. Obviously, I completely disagree with it. I also, again, believe it's an egregious violation of our civil liberties. Having a force like that monitoring elections are going to keep marginalized communities, people who typically don't have positive interactions with law enforcement, from going to vote, which I would argue is the whole point of the bill, right? Is the whole point of this that Ron DeSantis has put up. So it puts it on candidates, it puts it on organizations to figure out how are we going to combat this and help people feel comfortable. We don't yet know the scope of this force, right? We don't know if it'll be at every single polling location. We're not sure if it'll mainly be like an office. So we'll see what the governor kind of rolls out and what that means. But for folks who have seen House of Cards, it kind of reminds me of this episode where like Frank Underwood has like the police or like the National Guard stand at every election place to keep people from going to vote, right? Like this is what we have going on, except it's reality. And so we're going to keep a close eye on it. My hope is that the scope will be relatively small and it won't be a situation where we actually have like armed guards at every polling location because that is not going to create an environment where people want to go vote. So we're going to watch it closely and see exactly what that means for voting in Florida.
Thank you. Okay, up next we have, I think I can sneak in a few more questions. Okay, so we have Rachel. We have a lot of Rachels tonight, very popular night for Rachels. So we have Rachel Maldonado Azaminia. Hopefully I'm not saying that incorrectly. I'm sorry if I am. Rachel, can you please go ahead and unmute yourself and share with folks where you're joining us from, and please ask your question to Maxwell.
Hello, everyone. I'm from Rodeo, California. We're in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. So my question is, as a Latina, as a baby boomer and retiree, my concern is that a lot of Latinos are beginning to vote for Republicans. Many times it's issues like abortion and religion and stuff like that. And so my concern is how are the Democrats, and in your campaign, because I'm not familiar with your district, so I don't know if there's a lot of Latinos in your area. I know there's a lot of Latinos in Florida, but I'm not sure about your particular area. What kind of strategies are you going to do to reach out to that community? And not just like, sometimes I think we reach out to certain communities just when it's voting time, and we need to do it on a regular basis. And so my question is, how are you planning to reach out to the Latino community? Because we are a growing population. In California, we're huge. Mostly Mexican Americans over in my area, but so my question is, how do you want to reach out? Because that is a community I think that we really need to reach out to.
110%. And look, as a Latino myself, I'm Afro-Cuban. I 100% agree. I mean, my parents came here, or my mom came here during the freedom flights from Cuba, and especially Cubans are increasingly voting more, on the Republican side. A lot of that, especially in Miami, there's a long history of Republicans dominating the radio, which I know a lot of folks might say, like, the radio, yeah, the radio, and that's a big reason why a lot of folks vote for more conservative candidates in Miami, believe it or not. But a lot of this has to be on Democrats and candidates to actually do the outreach. That's like step one. And y'all would be surprised how many statewide campaigns there have been here in Florida that have not done Spanish outreach in Spanish to folks all across Florida. In Central Florida, we have a very vibrant, very large Hispanic population, Latino population. In my district specifically, depending on how the lines get drawn, it'll either be around 20 to 30%, which is a very large chunk. So of course, we're going to be reaching out in Spanish, right? Whether it's on the radio and TV and stuff like that, but we're also going out to events and we're getting people excited. When I first launched this campaign, I had a meeting with one of our local Boricua activists, and he told me, he was like, Max, here's the thing with the Latinos, right? You got to make us feel like we're back home, he was saying. It's like in our campaigns back home, when you're canvassing, it's not just you and your iPad with Van and like your staffer. It's like the candidate in a pop, with flags and drums and everything like that. And I took that to heart. And like I said earlier, for Pride, I put my salsa band on a Penske truck and we drove throughout Orlando playing salsa and Selena and everything like that. This is the energy we're going to bring to our traditionally Latino communities and neighborhoods throughout Orlando. We're just really getting started with our organizing. We're going to make people feel excited about our campaign, but also talk about the issues that are affecting them. I think a lot of times when Democrats speak with Latinos, they get pigeonholed into only talking about immigration, which is incredibly important. Don't get me wrong. However, every issue, right, affects Latinos and a lot of times disproportionately. And so I think that's a big problem with Democrats as well, is when we reach out to Latinos, yes, talk about immigration, of course, but also talk about healthcare and talk about livable wage and talk about the fact that a lot of Latinos live in poor environments, like as far as the environment they're in, because they've been pushed in those places, because there's segregation is a big thing in Central Florida. And so either way, this is the way we're going to be reaching out, Rachel, being very intentional. And we're really excited about it. And we're honored to have the endorsement of Latino Victory Fund, who only endorsed 2 candidates in Florida, one being Annette Tadeo, who's running for governor, and myself in Orlando. And so we're excited to have great partners in getting that outreach done.
Thank you.
Rachel, thank you so much for the question. Thank you for being engaged and for joining us. Maxwell, thank you for the answer. Folks, this has been such a diversity of questions. This has been great. I want to be respectful of Maxwell's time and everyone that took the time to be here with us tonight. So I'm going to kick it over to our co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor, one last time for a few final thoughts and maybe one last question. Stephanie?
Thank you. Yeah, as Rachel said, thank you to everyone for these fantastic questions, to Maxwell for your very thoughtful answers. Maxwell has put together an absolutely top-notch campaign operation. I hope if you liked what you heard today, you'll join his campaign as a grassroots donor. And relatedly, Maxwell, my final question for you, can you leave us with a few thoughts on why progressives should invest in this race right now and how contributions are fueling your campaign right now?
100%. Look, y'all, I mean, as an organizer, I'm always thinking about the timeline of our movement and really like the movement, right? And I think a lot of times we have these like times in history that really add to the energy. I think about things like as far back, not too far back, but things like Occupy Wall Street, how that change the country, right? And the way we thought about things. I think about the Bernie Sanders campaign, right? And how that was instrumental in getting people to think about things differently. I think about that video of AOC being elected and how that inspired so many young folks and really people across this country. These moments are incredibly important to building power. And you know, every time we make history or we do something big, it brings folks along for the ride, and it's up to us to be organized in a way where when these moments happen, we're ready to bring more people in to this progressive, you know, movement. And like I've said over and over again, we can't give up on Florida, right? There are millions of poor and working class folks yearning, crying out for champions, people who will fight on behalf of them, people who will see the world through the eyes of the most vulnerable. That's what this campaign is about. Like I said, we're out raising everybody, we're out organizing everyone, we're going to win this campaign, but we need help, we need resources. And so, you know, I think a lot of times folks, you know, forget, like, when you donate to a campaign, especially a congressional or state and local campaign, your money goes further than it would with like a presidential campaign, right? Because we're focused on a very specific group of people, a very specific demographic, and a very tailored message to get people out. We're meeting people where they're at while not changing our values. And we're going to grow the Progressive Coalition here in Florida. And when we wake up that day after Election Day, you'll be able to see on the news, well, Florida elected the first Gen Z member of Congress, bold progressive. You'll be able to say more than, I saw that guy on a Zoom. You'll be able to say, I was a part of that change. I was a part of that. And we're going to need everybody we can get to win this. So that would be my main reason, y'all, for donating. Let's create more moments. Let's make history here, not for the sake of making history, but for adding momentum to our movement. Imagine what it's going to mean to folks across the country when they see us elect a young Black Latino progressive in the heart of Florida after a session like we just had. I think it's going to be exactly what we need. So that would be why.
Cheers to all of that. Yes, yes, yes. So folks, thank you for being here with us tonight. Maxwell, thank you so much. We are so thrilled to be part of Team Maxwell, and to all of you joining us tonight. We could not do this without you, so thank you. Folks, let's end things how we started things. Can everyone go ahead and unmute themselves, and let's say bye and good luck to Maxwell and bye to each other.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Very much.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks,
Thank
Maxwell. Great job.
Buenas noches.
Get
Thank
on
you,
it.
Ernest.
Go get
Arriba.
Woo-hoo-hoo. You're
Bye.
cute, lady.
Thank
Good
you,
job,
folks.
Maxwell. Thank you.
Bye.
Y podemos. Way.
Thank you, folks. All right. Good night, everyone.
Just
Thank
threw you a
so
Twitter
much.
follow.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.